Over the past few weeks, the BBC have been heavily criticised for fake news. Also, they've been criticised in the past for the way that they are so against the British people, the way that they were biased on Brexit, the way that they are biased against the Conservatives, the way that when they make mistakes, it's always that they've accidentally made a mistake about Nigel Farage, accidentally made a mistake about Donald Trump, accidentally made a mistake about Tommy Robinson, accidentally made a mistake about the Conservatives, never accidentally made a mistake in terms of having to go at people who believe in climate change, never accidentally having to go at people who hate Brexit, never accidentally having a go at people who behave really badly from Extinction Rebellion and other left-wing cause groups. But you know what? I watched a video the other day with Andrew Gold and David Starkey talking about Andrew Gold's experience of racism within the BBC. Now, he's Jewish and he's a Conservative commentator. Some of you know that I had a bit of an argument with him when I thought he was a little bit rude during the Maya Tuesday conference. Some of you agreed with that. Some of you didn't. Either way, I didn't know who the bloke was. I just thought he was being quite rude at the time. Not important. I do think his video about racism in the BBC is really important. That's why I put a link in the description. But I want to tell you about my experiences of racism in the BBC because they are significant. And I will tell you that the BBC is not just racist against white people, it is openly racist against white people. And anyone who tells you that it's not is talking absolute garbage. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, please do consider a small donation to the Patriot Fund. We are supporting right-wing causes and trying to fight for those people that sometimes don't have a voice against the establishment in this country. So, I'll just give you a quick précis of what Andrew Gold said in his video to David Starkey. What he said was that he'd gone around the world, he'd learnt 5 languages, he'd been a real BBC insider. Now, some people have criticised Andrew for not being a right-winger when he was at the BBC. Well, I kind of believe his narrative. I don't know him, I've never really met him, but I believe his narrative, which is to say that he genuinely wanted to be scrupulously fair. He genuinely believed in the cause of the BBC and genuinely was proud to work there until he realised what the institution was. And I think that's a reasonable thing, isn't it? I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. And what he said was that he was forced, when he came up with a series of ideas for documentaries, he was forced to go through outside production companies. Nothing wrong with that. Officially, the BBC is supposed to use independent production companies. It's very clear that they've just got a cabal of their mates from the Andrew Gold video. So if you and I set up a production company and pitched to the BBC, we'd have absolutely no chance whatsoever. So it is just jobs for the boys. And I suspect there are revolving doors there where the people commissioning the outside production companies very quickly join the board of those outside production companies, something that the right gets criticised for all the time, but nobody cares when the left does it. But let's park that for a moment. What he says is, he said that these independent production companies kept saying to him, Andrew, look, these ideas are great, but we just can't have you in front of the camera. We need someone who's black. We need somebody who's Asian. We need somebody who's Chinese. We need somebody... And they said to him jokingly, can you not just pretend to be gay? Which I think is a great shame that somebody is put in that position. But effectively, Andrew Gold's career at the BBC, so he contends, and I've no reason to disbelieve him, in fact, I've got good reason to believe him, was destroyed by the fact that he was a white man. Now, the BBC wasn't openly anti-Semitic at the time. Whether the fact that he's Jewish would now count against him, I don't know. But effectively what it would be is it would be people at the top of the BBC who wanted to make it more diverse, who were kicking the ladder of opportunity away on the basis of ethnicity from other people. Just classic racism. And when we talk about institutional racism after the Stephen Lawrence case, we never really talk about institutions that will openly say to your face, we cannot employ you because you're white. You're great. I mean, in the case of Andrew Gold, they're literally saying, can you find someone to do your job for you? And then we'll just pretend that they do it, just as long as they're black, Asian, Chinese, gay, lesbian, trans, or whatever. Unbelievable, or disabled in some way. Okay, well, let me tell you my experience. So I was a contributor at the BBC, not a big surprise there. I will explain how that came about. In 1995, I was a member of the Young Conservatives. Now, you will remember that was the dying days of the John Major government, and the Conservative Party basically collapsed. There was virtually no young people, and I was in the northwest of England. So they wanted a first-time voter who was northern, who was a Conservative. That was quite hard to get hold of, and so I did an enormous amount of TV and radio. And whilst I always say that I went into media more recently from working at the House of Commons, there is a backstory of being a teenager and having made, not made a lot of TV and radio, I think that would be unfair, but I've been on a lot of it and contributed. So the first time I think I was racially discriminated against by the BBC, there was a debate in the leadership election in one or other leadership election, which I think was the one that William Hague won. No, it wasn't. It was the one that Michael Portillo was in against Ian Duncan Smith, I think. Anyway, so what happened was that I was phoned up by Newsnight. And Newsnight said to me, Andre, we need a right-wing, younger person to talk about who's supporting Ian Duncan Smith, who's going to be really, really good. I went, great. And they went, but we need someone who's going to be like you, but black. And I went, oh. They went, can you help us find a black person who's as good as you? And I went, well, you know, I mean, I'd love to be on Newsnight. And the pay was like 300 quid to be on it. So what they'd done was they'd literally phoned me up to say, we're going to racially discriminate against you. We're not going to give you the job. We're not going to get you on TV in this important debate. But we're now going to ask for your help in racially discriminating against you. And I will tell you, it continued there apace. Now, there are some notable examples. I still appear on BBC Northern Ireland where Stephen Nolan gets slagged off, but I've never had any problems with the bloke. I mean, I've had problems with him on air because he's deeply obnoxious to the guests sometimes. But ultimately, I always accept with BBC Northern Ireland that my job is to be the English bloke where they can unite in hatred against me. And I'm willing to do that if that's it. How pretentious does this sound? If that is the price of peace, I'm willing to pay it. I also appear on Nicky Campbell because they absolutely hate Donald Trump on that show and they need to bring somebody on who's vaguely credible to kick the crap out of. But all of the old stuff, all the other stuff basically just dried up and they weren't interested in having me on. But regularly, they do still phone to say, look, brilliant, Andre, we know everything about you, we think you're great, can you get an Asian for me? And of course, what I do is what anybody but sensible would do in this scenario, which is why they don't phone me anymore. I wait for a few days, pretend I'm helping, and then phone up and say I can't find anyone, but I'm willing to do it myself. Now, nobody in my position is going to do anything different to that. But, you know, we talk in this country about the way that people feel like they are being pushed out and people feel like the country is no longer theirs. Well, you know, when your national broadcaster phones you up and says, we will not give you a job on the basis of the colour of your skin, you do feel quite bad about that. Now, the BBC's argument is because King Charles is white, it's time to give Asians all the other jobs. Well, look, at the end of the day, the fact that King Charles is white does nothing for me. It makes no difference to my life. It doesn't make my life any better. It doesn't enrich me in any way whatsoever. And to kick the ladder of opportunity away, but specifically to do it in the way that happened to Andrew Gold, and my experience is exactly the same, which is we know you can do the job. We know you're qualified. The problem here is we may not do the work because we can't find anyone Asian to impersonate you. We can't find anyone black to say it. We can't find anyone gay, trans, whatever it is. And I think that is just a classic situation of what used to happen in the East End of London. No dogs, no blacks, no Irish on the door. But in this case, no whites, no conservatives, no Jews is the sign on the door of the BBC. Now, the BBC can squeal and say that it's talking about diversity. Well, that's not my experience. They never said, Andre, can you come on and find a black mate? They phoned me up to say that even though they believed that I, in terms of talent, was the person to get, also they would say, if we can't get a black version of you, we're not going to do the segment at all. So literally, they believe that there's nobody equally qualified to me. Do you know anyone equally qualified? And then to be thrown out. And of course, what we now know is, of course, the financial cost of this is colossal. I would expect a Conservative commentator to make 20% of what a left-wing commentator does. Can I tell you something? The best job to be in, advise your kids, the racism industry. If you are one of these people who writes reports about how everyone's a racist, you can make a fortune. Lee Jasper made millions out of doing that. Of course, you'd have to be from an ethnic minority to do it, but there's nothing that KPMG like more than writing a report about how they're all racist. Written by somebody with absolutely no talent whatsoever, who only got there because of the racial discrimination against white people. Now, look, at the end of the day, I'm not some sort of white ethno-nationalist. It doesn't bother me that we're trying to encourage diversity. What bothers me is the straight-out discrimination, and also what bothers me is the straight-out dishonesty, because I can tell you, anyone who denies Andrew Gold's claims is an absolute idiot, simply because I've seen it with my own eyes. I know exactly what they do, and I think it's a great shame. And when we're talking once again about young people in this country feeling disenchanted, turning to drugs, turning to alcohol, turning to violence, no longer respecting authority, when it's an authority that says to you, you are not welcome in your own country on the grounds that a settler community has to be prioritised for the jobs, has to be prioritised for the services, has to be prioritised for the opportunities, will do better than you in education. And at the end of that education, when you fought against a racist system, you'll be openly told that the apprenticeship that you wanted at the BBC is no longer open to people with your skin colour. I think that that is a recipe for social breakdown and disaster. And then, of course, what happens is, and it's a classic racist trope, isn't it? So what happens is, when the white community start rioting because they're so upset about the discrimination they face, they're accused of being far-right thugs. You can't win one way or the other. Please donate below, and as I say, I did leave the video, the Andrew Gold, David Starkey video link is below as well. Until next time, goodbye.